here. This is the last one we finished up with, and we're going to keep doing these here. Do something to write with. So our steps. So the first step when factoring is to find the greatest common factor. Something that is in common with all three terms, something we can factor out. Not every single expression, our quadratics, will have a greatest common factor, but if it does, we will need to factor it out. Our second step is we're going to have two sets of parentheses with three spaces. Two sets of parentheses with three spaces. Our third step is to find the sign. If the third term is positive, then the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. But if the sign is negative, if the third term is negative, then the signs are opposite. If the third term is positive, then the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. And we had these before. We had all these listed out yesterday. Our fourth step is to find the factors of the first and third term. And lastly, plug in those factors or plug in and check to make sure that they work. And we've had these, we listed these out yesterday. I'm just listing them out again so we do have them again. And we're going to use these steps with factoring, and they make factoring, I think, a little bit nicer. So we'll pick up where we left off yesterday with our 2x squared plus 7x plus 6. So the first thing we need to look for is a greatest common factor, a number that will go into 2x squared, 7x, and 6. There is a number that goes into 2x squared and 6, but not one that goes into all three. So there is no greatest common factor. And since there is no greatest common factor, we'll move on to step number 2, our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Now that we have that done, we move on to step number 3, to find the signs. If the third term is positive, then the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, our signs are opposite. Well, for this one here, our third term is positive. So the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term, which is also positive. So our signs inside both parentheses are plus and plus. Plus and plus. So that takes care of step number 3. Questions on this so far? Step number 4, we need to find the factors of the first and third term. Well, our first term, 2x squared. Well, the only set of factors for x squared are x, and then we have 2 and 1, yes? We can plug in the x and x. 2 and 1 we just need to plug in, so we have 2x and x, because 2's only factors are 2 and 1, 1 times 2. Either way, we have it. 6. Factors are 1 and 6, and 2 and 3. 1 times 6, and 2 times 3. Which one of these 2 sets of factors do we want to try first? 2 and 3. Where do we want to put the 2? Where do we want to put the 3? Well, we could try putting the 2 in the first one and seeing what we get. Now, when we check it, we don't have to multiply all the way through. We can, because we can do 2x times x, which would indeed give us our 2x squared. We can also do our 2 times 3, positive 2 times positive 3, which will give us our third term of positive 6, because that's where we got those from. But the main one we're focused on is the middle term of 7x. 2x times 3 is positive 6x. 2 times x is positive plus 2x. And 6x plus 2x is 8x. Is that the middle term we wanted? No. And again, there are patterns that we'll eventually start seeing in helping us get through or determine which factors probably aren't going to work. But if in this setup here, and there's a reason I did this one, 2x plus 2, is there a greatest common factor in that parentheses? Is there something in common with both terms? 2. So if this was a correct setup, there's a greatest common factor of 2 here, I could factor it out of both, leaving me with x plus 1, yes? Because I can divide the 2x by 2 and get x, divide the 2 by 2 and get 1. But that means that if there's a greatest common factor in either one of the parentheses, there had to be 1 at the beginning. Well, was there a greatest common factor to begin with? Well, no. So that means I can't have a greatest common factor other than 1 in either set of parentheses, because it just doesn't work. So that may seem like, why do we point this out? Well, it tells us that the 2, this 2 can't go with the 2x. Because if we have 2 and 2x, we do have a greatest common factor of 2. There's not 1 to begin with, there can't be 1 here. Now, if you don't see that or don't notice that, that's fine, because again, when we check, if we check it, as we saw, it didn't work. It tells us that way anyways. Now, if we check this here, we switch the 2 and 3. 2x times 2, positive 2 is positive 4x. 3 times x is positive 3x, and 4x plus 3x is 7x. Is that the middle term we wanted? Yes. So the correct factors for this here are 2x plus 3 times x plus 2. Questions on this here? Are you ready for the next one? On what part? Okay? Did it make sense to find the signs? Or how we found the signs? What's the sign of the third term? What is our third term? First, second, third. So what's our third term? What's its sign? So what's the sign of our third term? What's the sign in front of our third term? What's the third term? Because what is the third term? So so the first term is what? Squared. What's our second term? What's our third term? So what's the sign in front of the third term? Because it's right there, the sign, our third term is plus. If the sign of the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. Since the third term is positive, that third term has a plus sign in front of it. The signs here are going to be the same, and they're going to match the sign of the middle term, the one in the center. So they're both plus. Questions on that there? Questions on how we found the factors of the first and third term? So what's our first term? So what multiplies together to be x squared? So not focus on the 2, x squared. What two things multiply together to give me x squared? We only have one thing, x and what is x times x? X times x is what? What? X squared. So the only thing that multiplies together to give me x squared is what? And? No. The only thing that multiplies together to give me x squared is x and what? Yes. That's where we get x and x from. What are the products, or what are the factors of 2? What two numbers multiply together to give me 2? And? So the numbers that go in front of x have to be 2 and 1. We just put them in one of the places. Factors of 6 are what? What two numbers multiply together to give me 6? And 1 and 6 is right. What else? Yes, we picked one of those two and plugged it in. And we checked for the middle term. We're multiplying the 2x by this term here, the 3 and the x, to see, does it give us this middle term? If it does, it's the correct factors. If it doesn't, we change one of the sets of factors. Let's look at another example. Greatest common factor is our first step. Is there a number that goes into 4x squared, 7x, and 3? No. Since there is no greatest common factor, we're going to have 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. That's our step number 2, getting this set up. Our third step is to find the sign. So the third term is indeed positive. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. And the sign of our middle term is minus. So the sign that goes in both of them, because the third term's positive, is going to be the same. So they're either both going to be positive or both going to be negative. And the sign matches the sign of the middle term. Now for this one here, the middle term was negative. So both of our signs are negative. So if the third term is positive, the signs in the parentheses are going to be both positive or both negative. Now since the middle term was negative, they're both negative. They're both minuses. Questions on steps 1, 2, or 3? You ready for step number 4? Factors of the first and third term. First term is 4x squared. Well, the x squared can only be x and x. That's the only way it works out for x squared. Factors of 4. 1 and 4, 1 times 4, or 2 times 2. Now, at this point, we just need to pick one of the sets of factors to try first. Which one do we want to try first? 1 and 4. So 1 and 4. At this point, again, it doesn't really matter where we place the 1, where we place the 4. We just need to pick a spot. Now we're going to pick the factors of 3, or find the factors of 3, which is 1 and 3. Any others? No. So again, just like with the factors of 4, we picked 1 and 4. Here we're stuck with 1 and 3. Where do we want to put the 1? Where do we want to put the 3? 1 in the first, 3 in the second. Because again, we're just picking them. I would not stress too much on which one goes where. Pick them, place them. Because the last part is to check. We don't focus too much on the x times 4x because that will always give me, or should always give me, 4x squared, our first term. The negative 1 times negative 3 will get us back to positive 3. Those line up. We need to check and make sure that this middle term is negative 7x. Now our x times negative 3 is negative 3x. Our negative 1 times 4x is negative 4x. And negative 3x minus 4x is what? Negative 7x. Is that the middle term we wanted? Yes. So these are the correct factors of this here. Questions on this so far? We ready for the next one? So the check step is really just to make sure we got it set up correctly. That's the whole part of that. Is more verifying that this is the correct setup. Did I skip one? Okay. So first thing we look for is what? Greatest common factor. There's not one. 2 and 7, both prime. There's no common factor between them. So that means we go straight to step number 2. Our 2 sets of parentheses with, yes, all 3 of them. And we want it to be an integer. Because, I mean, technically I could factor 2 out of all 3. And it would leave us with x squared. Right. Because we could, but it would leave us with x squared, which is nice. The middle term would be 5/2 x minus 7/2. It leaves us with these fractional numbers. If we can avoid fractions, especially with factoring, we're going to avoid them. Now, we will get to some pieces where we end up with fractions anyways. But with factoring, we want to try to get a number out that leaves us with integers. So, good question. Any other questions? So that takes us to step number 3, yes? If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So what's the sign of our third term? Negative. So the signs are opposite, which means one is positive, one is negative, one is plus, one is minus, yes? Does it matter which one I put as plus and minus? No. Because again, we're going to check this at the end. I just need to put the signs down. I need to get a starting setup to give us a spot or a place to go. Fourth step, find the first and third term. Our first term is 2x squared. Well, the x squared is kind of nice. It will give us x and x in that first spots. 2 is also kind of nice because it's just 1 and 2. With the x, we really don't have to write the 1. We just need to figure out a spot for 2. There's 1. Second. Factors of 7 are 1 times 7. Put the 7 in the first. Is that what you're saying? We can try this here. X times negative 7 is negative 7x. 1 times 2x is plus 2x. So now we need to do negative 7x plus 2x, negative 7 plus 2, negative 5x. Is that the middle term we wanted? Now there are going to be times where we do get the correct middle term, but wrong sign. So there are some times we can set it up and get positive 5x instead of negative. If we get the correct number but wrong sign, we switch the signs, flip the signs, and it will correct the sign error. Questions on this here? I believe this is the last one on the note sheet, yes? Let's start with step number 1, greatest common factor. I mean, there's a number that goes into 3 and 6, but 7 it does not. So there is no greatest common factor. There's not a number that I can factor out of all 3 and end up with a non-fractional number. So we'll have our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So here the third term is negative, so the signs are opposite. One is positive, one is negative. Does it really matter which one I put first or second? No, we just need to pick one. I'll probably end up putting plus and then minus just had it. It really doesn't matter. And when that third term's negative, does it matter what the middle term sign is? No, it's just they're opposite. They're straight opposite. It does give us hints at what the arrangements can be, but just based off sign, we're just looking at the third term when it's negative. Now we're going to look at the factors of the first and third term. Factors of 3x squared. Well, the x squared part tells me that I'll have x and x in the first spots. And, well, if the factor for x squared, if the x squared showed up where the 6 is, we'd still have x and x, but they wouldn't appear in the first spots in each set of parentheses. They would end up in the third spot. They'd be in the other spot because that's its factors. Factors of the first term go in the first spots. Factors of the third go in the third spots. Does that make sense? Yeah. Factors of 3. 1 and 3. Where do we want to put the 3? First or second set of parentheses? Doesn't matter. You good with that? All right. First. Now we need to find the factors of 6. There's more than one. We do have 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. Which one do we want to try first? 2 and 3. Which number goes first, 2 or 3? And 3 can go second. We can check this here. 3x times negative 3. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9x. 2, positive 2 times positive x is plus 2x. And negative 9x plus 2x is negative 7x. Is that the middle term we wanted? Yes. And that's it. Now, if you do get the factors on the first try, first way you put it together, awesome. If not, that is perfectly fine. Because again, if we got those not the right factors, we could switch the 2 and 3. Try it again. If that didn't work, then we could try the 1 and 6 in both arrangements. But that is it with these here.